Introduction to Terraform. Exercise 3. As usual, we're gonna copy the files from the previous exercise. So let me copy main. Let me copy tf bars and the variables tf. Perfect. So in this exercise, we are going to talk about setting up a load balancer, proximity placement groups, locals, and accelerated networking. So let's start. Let's update the version. I think it's 89 right now. Not sure, so you're gonna do 85. And yeah, major or equal than 2.85. That's gonna be our Azure RM version. Provider stays the same. Public IP address stays the same. Okay, our resource group, we're gonna add locals right before that. Oops, locals. So the idea of using locals is to avoid code repetition, I would say. It makes your code less cluttered with so many things that keep repeating itself. So it's like a shorthand. So let me show you how to do it, and then we can discuss about it later. Require underscore tags equals environment. Okay, in here I'm gonna use the locals for tagging Terraform resources on Azure. You can use them to specify like ownership of resources, life cycle, region, cost center or business unit, stuff like that. So it makes inventory easier and more clear instead of just creating resources and you know what is the life cycle or who is the owner of a particular resource or the support group. All those stuff you can add tags in there and help clarify who owns what and who's responsible to do whatever needs to be done. So let's continue. Environment. Actually, you can name it something else instead of environment. Probably you can use life cycle in here. Bar labels. This is going to be a dictionary or a map to be more precise. Environment and subscription bar labels. Subscription. What else? Market. Bar. Again, this section is a free field. I mean, whatever your needs are, that's where your tags are going to be. Market and I'm gonna add another one. Resource underscore group type. Again, this is entirely up to you. Whatever your needs are, that's what you're gonna include in here. And I'm making the keys for the map the same name of the variable name, just for ease of reading and facilitates documentation as well. So okay, so we have required tags. Now we're gonna include it on our resource group. Tags, yes, equals local required tags. Just notice the difference. It says in here locals plural, but at the moment you call it local singular. Just something to keep in mind when you're using them. Resource group, that's fine. Okay, so we need to define them on the variables tf file, and we need to assign a value to them on their Terraform tf bars. So let's do that before I move for further. So variables, right on the region seems appropriate. Oops, variable labels description. Tags for resources, resource identification, inventory, any, you can, whatever you use is type. We know it's a map, so okay, we have that on tf bars right on the region. Labels, it's a dictionary, so the first one is environment. Equals development. That's why I said probably life cycle will be better instead of environment. The next one is subscription. Goes in quotes. Subscription equals whatever your subscription happens to be. I'm just gonna put my subscription for now. Market, let's say US for United States in my case. Resource group type, application, yeah, or virtual machines actually. Then I close my dictionary right there. This is it. And we can reuse next, I mean, because we can include these tags in any other resource. I'm gonna add them again on the virtual machines, but you can include them on every single resource that you need to add them. I mean, depending on your needs, of course. So network configuration, that stays the same. Oh, the resource group, of course. We are on exercise 3, no longer 2. So network configuration stays the same, subnet stays the same, public IP stays the same. We have to add something. because the load balancer that we're about to create is going to be standard, has additional features that I think are important. We need to specify to use standard public IP address in here. Network interface. And don't worry about the alignment in here that looks crooked in here on line 73. With Terraform FMT, we're gonna give it a nice spacing. Network interfaces stays the same. Oh, actually no. I mentioned accelerated networking. You specify that right here, and it sounds quite obvious, and it is. I mean, basically in here you are gonna use a variable. You're gonna be using a performance-oriented network interface, so it's gonna be faster. So that's a feature that you can enable. Is it true or false? For this exercise, I'm just gonna make it false. Yeah, why not? Just gonna make it false. But if you happen to need to have an application that requires this highest performance and it cannot tolerate the low latency, actually high latency, it's a feature that you can use. You can leverage that. Accelerated networking. Let me double check what is the name here. Extra E. No, here. So enable. Hopefully I got that right. So description. And is type equals boolean. Well, let's include the default, right? Default will be false. So you can change this value to whatever. Actually, since I already said the default is going to be false, you don't need to include it in TF bars because I'm going to be using the default. Now, if you want to make it true, then you can leave the default as it is, but you need to give it assign it a value on the TF bars. So carry on. No longer here on main. We can close this. Oh, another autocomplete is not helping me. Security configuration. Yeah, looks correct. Yeah. 443. Let's make it 80 for this example. I mean, in real scenarios, you probably should be using HTTPS. I'm using port 80 just for this exercise. Network interface security group association. Okay. I mentioned in the past that we probably should be using a subnet security group association. So let's do that. Azure RM subnet network security group association. Okay, since we are using the subnet, we don't need to loop through all the interfaces like we were doing before. So instead of networks interface ID, it will be subnet ID. Subnet ID, assure rm that stays. This goes away. Subnet that ID. So it's assure rm subnet that subnet ID. And this comes from the subnet block, which is right here. You don't see ID because that will get created once we run the Terraform apply, and that value will get inserted in this section on line 126. So we won't know it until it gets created. Network security group ID, that looks correct. So no changes in there. Before the virtual machine configuration, we're going to add another block for the proximity placement group. This is when Azure creates your virtual instances, it will try to create them as close as possible from each other. Again, this is something that you do if you care about your network latency. So let me add just a little comment in here. Proximity placement group. Adding a little bit of decoration. Okay, so resource Azure RM proximity placement group. Yeah, that looks correct. And this second part is entirely up to you. I'm just gonna name it something similar. Proximity placement group. Great. Has a name. So we're gonna use our variables for that. So var that resource underscore group dash proximity placement group. We need resource group name and location. So let me copy that because we have it somewhere else. Actually, right here. These two lines. So just copy them. You want to type them and paste them. And that's all you need for this. Now on the virtual machine section, disable password authentication. Let me check on the bar. Oh yeah, we have it. And we have it to true. Perfect. So we need to add the proximity placement group ID for this. And it's going to be Azure RM underscore proximity placement group. Autocomplete. No, he's actually right. That ID. Yep. We are getting that from here. This is what we are calling right now. And we're just getting the ID that we don't know right now because it hasn't been created yet. So we don't have an ID. And let's include tags. Why not? so you see how that works. Local required tags. There you go. That's OS disk stays the same. Source image reference, we're gonna keep it the same. Admin SSH key, it's fine. Connection, yeah, that's correct too. Provisioner file, yeah, we won't be using this right now, so let me delete it. Let's go to the provisioner section. Sudo app update, that's correct. We're gonna install Apache, that's correct as well. Okay, index.html, we don't have it anymore since we removed the profile file section. So we're gonna create something just to demonstrate the load balancer in action. So let me type a little bit: sudo echo backslash to escape the double quotes. Open HTML tag, open header tag, and my IP is gonna do a little bit of bashing here. Quiet HTTP column / IPv4 that I'm using the same thing that I'm using to get my public IP address, but this case is gonna come from the virtual machines. That's what I'm doing right in here. .com. Yeah, I think it's correct. Let me check. Yeah, looks about right, hopefully. Okay, now we close our h1 tag, and we're going to close our HTML tag on that file. What I'm doing in here is just creating a file. Well, right now when I do the redirect, that's all I'm doing, just creating a file. Yeah, looks correct. So I'm gonna create a file and replace the one that comes from default by default from Apache, so we can see the load balancer. We should see how the IP changes when we refresh the page on the load balancer. Output public IP address, we're gonna put that on a different file. Probably should be start doing that, because I don't want to create a really extensive file we're gonna have to scroll a lot just to find a particular section. It's probably better if you create small files. So we're gonna start doing that. That's it for this file. So let's create another one for the load balancer, which is the main topic on this exercise. Load balancer TF. So for the load balancer, we're gonna need to create another IP address, another public one. So I mean, we could probably do it on the no. It's not as clean as this way. I mean, you can probably create just inserting another variable, create like 3 IP addresses on the other module on here, the public IP, AzureRM public IP, right here instead of using this variable, we're gonna need to create another one, and instead of 2 VMs, it's gonna be 3, but it's a little bit confusing. So I'm just gonna create the dedicated resource Azure RM public IP for the load balancer in here. So everything is isolated, like all things load balancer going here. It's easier to read that way or understand. Azure RM public IP, and in the name I'm gonna put load balancer public IP. So it has a name as usual. We're gonna use our variable for that. Bar that resource underscore group dash load balancer dash public IP. Resource group name is gonna be Azure RM that name, and the location. Location, you can probably you can use a bar location, a bar region. That's the thing that we're using, or you can use the same thing that I use for the resource group. Don't see it here. That location, either one is fine. Allocation method static, because you want to preserve that IP, right? And the SKU, that's important. This one has to be standard as well. Okay, that's it. Yeah, that's it for the public IP. Now we're going to create the actual Azure RM. Oops. Underscore LB for load balancer. Load underscore balancer. So a name. Bar that resource underscore group. Dash load balancer. Location. Yeah, location. We can use a Azure RM resource group like on line 4, but we can also do bar that region. It's gonna give us the same value. Let me just copy this line 3. Resource group name is that, and this queue, which is important, we need to specify standard. In this one, you can use a basic, but it doesn't have all the functionality that we really want for this particular exercise. So standard as well. Front end IP configuration, autocomplete. Good. So name equals, this is entirely up to you. I'm just gonna name it public IP address. And the actual public IP address, public IP address ID, and we're gonna get that from Azure public IP dot load balancer public IP dot ID. And autocomplete is not really helping me here. Okay, good. That's it for it. Yeah, you don't need anything else for this one. I mean, if you were using like an internal network using ExpressRoute, you might need to specify instead of public IP address ID, private. In that case, you also will need a subnet ID. But in our case, we're using public IP addresses for this exercise. Now we need to create the backend address pool. Azure RM LB back and address pool. Back and address pool. Good. Load balancer ID. Load balancer dot ID. This comes from the previous resource block from here. And as usual, the ID we don't know it yet, but we will when it gets created. We need to give it a name. So I'm gonna call it web server address pool. The name is entirely up to you. It's just a label that you're gonna put in there. Okay, now we need to do a network interface association with the backend address pool. So Azure RM network interface backend address pool association. They really have long names. Wow. Azure Network Interface Backend Address Pool Association. Yeah, looks correct. A lot of typing. Interface association. For this one, since it's related to all the network interfaces that we have, and we have one per virtual machine, so I'm creating 2 virtual machines, so I have to use count bar non-VMs. And network interface ID is Azure RM and network interface, that one. Count that index. That ID. This comes from the network interfaces over here, right here, this one. So we are associating the network interfaces through to the back end of the load balancer, so it knows where to redirect the traffic. We need IP configuration name. I'm gonna use an actual string in here because it's the same value. I mean, You can probably call it from the module itself. I'm doing it this way. -ip-conf. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this value over here comes from another main. Right here. This is it. Line 84. That's the value that we're inserting in there. And we need one more thing. The actual backend. And it's Azure RM LB backend. That's the one. That ID. It's this one. So we are associating the network interfaces with this backend. That's what we are doing on this particular block. Okay, we need the rules, load balancer rules. So resource Azure RM underscore LB underscore rule LB rules. Well, it's just one rule, but it's fine. LB for load balancer. So name equals LB web server. Then we have a resource group name, so we can copy that from line 12. Just to save some typing. So load balancer ID is going to be Azure RM load balancer. Oh, it doesn't show. Okay, Azure RM LB. Perfect. Now it shows ID. So the load balancer that this rule is associated to. Protocol is going to be TCP front end port 80, backend port 80 as well, front end IP configuration name is the name that we gave it on the load balancer resource block, which is public IP address. Is the line 16. That's the one. Now we need the backend IDs, pool IDs, address pool IDs. This is a list. So we use brackets for that. So Azure RM LB backend address pool. That backend pool that ID. And that comes from this guy from line 21. That's where that is coming from. Okay, we have the rules. Now we need the load balancer probe. And after that, I think we are done with the load balancer. Azure RM LB probe. Of course, name http -help-check. This is entirely up to you. I just made up that name right now. Um, resource group name as usual. So we copy that. Um, and we require a load balancer ID, so we can copy that as well. The port is going to be 80. Protocol is optional. I prefer to include it. HTTP, but it's optional. This value is optional. Now, if you include protocol, you need to specify the request path, which is going to be /index-html. That's our file. Interval in seconds 5. Oops, which is the minimum that you can go on Azure. They don't let you go any lower than that, so just keep that in mind. Number of props, and we're gonna make it 5 too as well. Why not? Okay, so we are done with the load balancer. We need the output, so a new file. Outputs.tf. Yeah, prefer to have it on a separate files. That way we don't clutter the main TF. And I'm gonna get just the public IP addresses. You can get multiple things from here. This is the only thing that I care right now. IP addresses. So output public underscore IP address, and the value for that is going to be the value from the public IP address for the virtual machines. So we get that Azure RM underscore public underscore IP. Since we have multiple of those, we're going to add a star. We have 2, but if you have more than that, you need to pass a star in there as well. And that IP address, that's the element that we want from there. And just to save some typing, copy these lines. Load balancer public IP address. I want to see that as well. Here is load balancer. That's the name I gave it. Underscore. So this one comes from this one comes from here, public IP address. And this guy over here, line 10, comes from the load balancer public IP address, which is at the very top. So yep, this is it. Let's throw a save all. Let's do Terraform init 290. That's the new version. Wow, I was saying 289. Okay. Terraform validate. Let's see what kind of mistakes I have. I probably have a lot. Storage. String require. So let's look at our variables definition. So we know exist, but it looks like I'm calling the wrong way. Storage account type is a list. And on TF bars storage account type, it is a list. Let's look at main 159. There you go. Oh, of course. Yeah, makes total sense. 0. That's the first element that I'm gonna get, which is the standard, which is the one I want. With that corrected, we throw a save. Another validate. Let's see if there is more errors. No more errors. Surprising. FMT, so it looks pretty. Excellent, now everything is aligned. We are ready for Terraform plan dash out equals tf plan. Let's let it run. Four elements. The key doesn't identify. I have a typo, that's what it is. Yeah, no big deal. So we go to our main and make a correction on locals right here. Yeah. Oops. Environment. Yeah, that makes more sense. So another save. Interesting that validate didn't got that. Okay, let's run it again and see how far we get this time. Okay, that worked. Let's run the apply. If there is no more errors, we should be able to access our web servers through the load balancer. Okay, creating the load balancer. Let's see how far it is going. So we have the resource group already there. Okay, schedule already the virtual machines, the public IP address. Backend pools already have them. Yes, they are there running. Help prof. It's not being used yet, but it's not done. Oop, it's installing. No, it's updating the repository. Now it's going to install. Yeah, it's installing Apache. Okay, well, says that is successful. Let's see. Hopefully it is. Let's go to our web browser, paste and go. Okay, 20, 120, 122, 244. That one. Okay, let's see if it changes. It should change at some point. You need to do this part. I'm just verifying that the load balancer is doing what it's expected to be doing. Copy. Done. It didn't change. That is interesting. That is very interesting. I see both machines are there. That is interesting. Why doesn't... Should be rotating. This is a little bit weird. Assure RM. Assure user. Assure user. At let's see what it does right now. Okay, exit 20. So it should give us a couple of errors. There you go, finally rotated. So the load balancer is working. It is working. And if I refresh, it's the other IP. Excellent. Oops, not that one. So it is working. So let me start it back up. Start. Yeah, it's running. Stay on 113. Okay, but it's fine. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's working. So that's it for this exercise. After practicing, remember to always destroy the resources, so you don't want to be charged. So with that, I say goodbye and happy terraforming.